if you got to hit the disclaimer or anything.
Yeah, I don't know what happens anymore. We got too many of them. But yeah, man. I'll let you take the lead, buddy. Let's go. Let's do it.
Well, on this episode of whatever we
Of
decided to
whatever.
talk about, got my man Jerome here with Hanson Realty. Right? Yeah, Hanson Realty. Yep. Yeah, myself, I'm Zack with Edge Home Finance, and today we are talking about frequently asked questions between buyers and sellers. So we get a lot of kind of repeat questions. Seems like everyone is missing the same bits of information. So hopefully this video, we can bridge the gap. I, as a mortgage broker, more deal with buyers. Jerome, as a realtor, deals with both buyers and sellers because he is a real estate agent. So he's helping people get in and out of homes. I just focus on really getting people into those homes with financing. So,
Yep.
Jay, I know you've been doing this a while now. On the listing side, because I don't really deal with it, what are the big differences that you see, when it comes to those kind of, because right, they're already homeowners, they have experience going through the process compared to somebody that could be a first-time buyer. So I'm sure it's a little bit different than when you're dealing with that new client.
Yeah. So I would say that probably one of the biggest differences that I see, and it's not really a complaint, but it's kind of a pet peeve that it's becoming for me right now. What it is, and actually you and I just talked about this. What it is that when you become a home seller, you almost completely forget what it was like to be a home buyer, right?
Right.
All of a sudden you feel like it's some sort of a competition, right? You feel as if you have to win. You get out there and you're like, okay, let's sell this house for the highest possible price that we can possibly, think of. And we're not going to do any updates. We're not going to upgrade nothing. We're not going to clean nothing. We're not going to declutter. You know what I mean? We're just going to throw it up on the market for the highest price possible. And they've completely forgotten that when they were a home buyer, they wanted to see things immaculate, right? But now the tables are turned and they think that, everything's just going to be cool. No, it's time to, take it back a notch, make sure that you put yourself in the buyer's shoes and make sure that your home is ready to actually be sold and presented to buyers. You know what I mean? Like when they walk in, they want to feel good. They want it to smell right. They don't want to smell the pets. They don't want to have none of that. You know what I mean? So that's probably the biggest thing that sellers have to reacclimate themselves to. Yep.
Right. Walking through, buying that home again, right? You want the house to be, if it's your first home, you're not looking for that fixer upper. You're looking for something that's key. And somebody who may have been living in their home for 10, 15 years and hasn't really updated it. It's like you're walking into a house from the late 90s that's never been touched. And then it's really, you're asking for the highest price for a house that's been fully updated in the same neighborhood. And buyers are just like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I think that's great having to go back into the mindset of, remember when you bought your home, you wanted things to be right. You wanted things to look good. You didn't want to walk in a house and it smells, funky. So it's very interesting to get sellers back into that mindset. And how do you gear them towards to think like that? Because they want the highest and best. And how do you advise them?
Yeah, honestly, it starts from the very initial contact, and just that ongoing contact that I have with them and from the time that I knew them as a buyer. I'll continue that same upkeep, continue kind of guiding them. And one of the things that you definitely need to think about is, maybe I didn't know them, when they first bought or whatnot, but what just popped into my head is a generation is really only thought of as what, like 20, 30 years?
Yep.
That's new generation spawns up every 20, 30 years, right? So if you've been in your house for 10, 15, 20 years, you're talking about half a generation or almost like a full generation that you've just skipped, right? Your home may still look pretty much the same way that it did when you bought it, and you're from a completely different generation than this new set that are going to be looking at your house, right? So all of a sudden, everything in your home needs to fit with the new trends of the day. And that's something that is very hard for sellers to actually get used to. But they definitely need to get used to it. That's why it's good to continually stay in contact with your real estate agent, stay in contact with your lenders so you know what's going on the market, so you know what the home trends are. I know it seems kind of weird, that we do push that type of stuff out. You'll see the real estate agents pushing stuff out about the trends. It's important for you. You know what I mean? Because you need to actually stay up with the times. And like I said, it could be an entirely different generation that, just like you don't like their music, they're not going to like your furniture, the way you stage your property. They're not going to like it.
Right. Right. And that
Yep.
goes back to buyers, are really looking at how are things kept. If you're not updating your house, but then you're asking for that fair market value, it's a little hard to justify it because that buyer is going to go in there with like, wow, this does not fit what I'm looking for based on how,
Yeah.
you know, all these other houses are looking that have been updated. So I think it's very interesting that these points.
Yep. How about we jump into something that you're going to be expert at, which obviously is getting people into homes. I kind of compiled also a little bit of a list of what I think, one of the main questions are when a first time home buyer wants to jump into this movement, right? So obviously one of the first things they're going to be looking for is, how do I know when I can actually afford a home? Right. So, and that's right up your alley. So what do you think? Like, what's the first piece of advice you give them when they ask questions like that?
Yeah. So the way that I view it is when someone's asking, what kind of home can I afford, especially if they're renting right now, I like to compare what they're paying for rent towards what could that be towards a mortgage. Some people have very expensive rents where we are at. They could be renting a home that is $2,800 a month, $2,500 a month between that purchase price, or excuse me, that rental price. And then I will show them like, hey, this could be equivalent, depending where you're at, to let's just get for example, a $375,000 house. If you're paying
Yeah.
about $2,400 a month, 25, and it just puts that perspective into it to where this isn't yours if you're renting, right? You're paying someone else's mortgage, whether you like it or not, when you're renting. And then it sparks that conversation of how do you go into being able to afford the house? Because a lot of people think they just can't afford a house whatsoever. Of course, the big things that impact people, if you have a lot of liabilities, a lot of debt, that's going to reduce your purchase power.
Yeah.
But it's really seen of like fitting them into what are you currently paying right now? How does that translate to a mortgage? And that's my first conversation, really, just to
Yeah.
see where they're at. Because some people I do talk to, their rent is unheard of low, and I'm like, well, maybe you should enjoy that while you can. So, but be prepared, right? Your landlord could increase
Yeah.
it. But folks that really have a lot of debt are the ones that kind of, they need to plan better because a car payment could be a huge impact on your liability. It's the second biggest debt that you usually take on other than a mortgage. Um, so it's advising people to, hey, if you're concerned about your liabilities, reduce them as much as possible. So when it comes time to purchase, you're at your full potential, or excuse me, your full purchase power.
Yeah. So, I'm glad you brought up that kind of your initial conversation starts off with, if they're a renter, then you sort of compare that to what the mortgage would be like and all that. One of the things that I love to drive home is especially with my active duty military guys and gals. I will say that when I meet them and they are living on post and they believe that everything is cool because they're using their BAH, they're basically just giving their BAH away to the on post community and stuff like that. I definitely compare that. You know what I mean? I compare the amount of money that they've spent, however long they've lived on post. I'll be like, oh, you've been here for a year, and you literally just calculate that. How much BAH have you given away, right? Versus how much could be going into a mortgage.
Yeah.
So, what do you see as far as, renters versus people that are on post and stuff like that? How do you tackle that?
I mean, just like that, right? Especially if you're living on post, depending, right? Because they do have some lower BH areas, but let's just say you're living somewhere and they are taking every penny that you get for your BAH. I mean, you're not pocketing anything, right?
Yep.
When I was a Joe living in an apartment, my apartment was lower than my BAH, so I got to keep that. Um,
Yep, exactly.
but when you're living on post, there's really, I feel like it's a bigger hindrance to you. I know some people like it, but if you have a, you know, future forward thinking mindset, it's where you want to be because you're giving all that money away. You're not building any kind of equity or gain whatsoever. So I think it's easier to show people, hey, when you're living on post, not going to knock military housing. Some are better than others. Uh, you know, how does this really take you to where you want to be? How does this benefit you? And for some people, it's like very easy to see because on Fort Carson, I mean, I believe the E5 living on post is giving away almost $2,300 a month, 22 to 2,300 a month, and that is pretty equivalent to a mortgage for about
Yep.
a $350,000 house, and that's a
Yes,
starter home.
exactly.
So it's easier that way. I think some people also that are renting kind of have the mindset that, hey, I pocket whatever $200 a month in my BH, which really just goes towards your utilities. So are you really winning if you're renting still? But the on
Yeah.
post folks, I think it's very easy for them to see because you don't keep any of your BH.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting. I actually had a conversation recently with somebody, actually was in my prior unit before I retired. Reached out to me, wanted to see if they maybe because they'll probably be PCSing back, wanted to see about a home, and it never dawned on me that this person was renting the entire time that they had been here before.
Mhm.
And prior to that as well, so I did the same type of thing. I said, hey, let's say you get here, and then you rent for 3 years. Well, this is how much you're giving out, and I think it came out to something like $83,000, right? And it didn't dawn on me until later that that person has been doing that, renting for however many years. And it was only 83,000 for those 3 years that I just calculated. I mean, what if I went back to the 6 and 7 year mark that he's been renting? I mean, oh my goodness, the
Right.
the the money. Yeah, it's just a bonanza of money that they're just giving away, man. But yeah, so let's do one more question for you, and it's one of the things that definitely pops up. And I think in the last 2 days, this is a question you probably have received quite a bit. Rates. Why are rates going up? How is a first time home buyer supposed to handle that right now? Here we are talking about all the money that, they might be giving away as far as, renting or, if they stay on post and all that kind of stuff. But those rates are a hindrance, right? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, rates. I mean, typically the first question that I get is, what's the rates? What's my rate? What are rates doing? What do I think rates are going to do? Kind of a whole, I'd say I have like a top five when it comes to rates, and they're all pretty similar in what people are looking for. Overall, right, the jobs report was not what we were expecting. Actually, we want to see some unemployment numbers go up. It's weird. We think low unemployment's great for an economy. We actually want it to be a little bit higher than what it's sitting at. The other big thing that I've noticed is after the CPI report that came out today, it's not what people were expecting. I think the Fed was expecting it to be a little bit lower. I think we came in at 3.1 this month, and they were expecting it to be at 2.9, which is still better than I believe last month's. But the market today, February 13th, 2024, is not reacting positively to it. So
Yeah,
the way that I have viewed rates in just the past 6 months, and this is how I explain it to people, is, we can't control it, but in October, I closed somebody at a conventional loan at like a 7.75 and then a VA loan at 7.5. So to be able to see rates in the sixes now is definitely better than what
yeah.
we were just at in quarter three, quarter four of 2023. That being said, the future is a mystery, and we don't know what is going to happen, especially with the way things have been going. They can go up, down, left, right, and we really just can't predict that future. But if I'm looking at just my past 6 month chart, we're doing better than we were in October.
Okay, yeah. So you know what, man, I would I'm definitely happy you brought up the chart, because there's this thing in investing and just overall having assets where, and this definitely applies to rates, where we say, when in doubt, zoom out, right? Because what you're describing right now, with what the rates have been doing, where everything's really choppy, right? And we can say the same thing with like the bumpiness as far as people's property appreciation, or it coming down, so it kind of looks choppy, looks like this. People are a little scared, and what they really need to do is take that graph and zoom out to your 10-year mark, your 15-year mark, your 20-year mark, and then you'll see what rates actually look like, right? You just talked about how rates right now, we're like high sixes, I think you said, right? We're
Um,
in, it has a six handle,
yes,
right?
in the sixes.
Yeah. So, it has a six handle. Those are good rates if you actually zoom out and you see what rates have typically been average wise, right?
Right.
We're still in the territory of decent rates. It's just that we have a recency bias of, 2, 3 years ago, where rates were, 2, 3%, right?
Right.
But yeah, if you zoom out, you'll see what actually happens. Same thing with price appreciation on homes, for those of us that are wary about actually purchasing a home, because we think that, oh my God, maybe next month my home price is going to tank, and then I'll be the sucker because I bought. What you really need to do is you need to zoom out and see what's happened to home prices over the past 10, 15, 20 years. And what you'll see is that it just goes up and to the right. Right?
Right.
You don't even see the wavy lines anymore. You don't see all the troubles. All you see is that it actually just appreciated with time. Right? So yeah, I'm definitely glad you brought that up.
Yeah. And I think most people don't look at it from that long term perspective. We're just looking at it between, I mean, yes, rates were 2, 3% a few years ago, and the Fed has made it clear that we will never see that again. Those
Yeah,
low
we probably
rates.
won't.
Yeah, they have made it clear that, at least probably not in our lifetime, that that's not a thing. So we need to set the expectations. But again, before all that craziness, you had rates in the fours, fives, and sixes, and that's where we don't, where a lot of people are hung up on. They're not paying
Yeah,
attention to that. They're just looking at, oh wow, all this stuff in the media about things are just terrible, blah blah blah. But whether we're looking at the micro or the macro, rates are rates are going to do what rates are going to do, and this isn't as bad as it has been in the past. I mean, where we're sitting at today.
yeah, yeah. All right. So another seller question. Got anything for me on sellers?
No.
Everything good? Let me see if I have anything that I wanted to bring up here. So I already talked about the repairs and some of the upgrades that sellers definitely need to take a look at. Oh, you know what? I do want to kind of remark on this, just for, and maybe we'll make this the last one. Um, so as far as selling property goes, for my property sellers out there, one of the questions that I do get a lot is, how long will it take to sell this house, or you know what I mean, sell
Mhm.
my house? Um, and it just varies, right? There is an average number, which would be for your local area, right? That does, go up and down based on how marketable your property is, um, how good your property looks, the price point of your property. Obviously, there is a average number that you want to look out for. When you reach out to your agent, we'll definitely give you that. However, what we've been seeing and what I've noticed so far is that sellers still kind of have this kind of rosy mentality where they believe that their property should be sold like within 2 weeks or so, right? And no one's actually sat down and explained to them that in an average market, in a balanced market is basically where you have just as many buyers out there as there are sellers. So, the market's kind of flat. In that balanced market, it takes about 4 to 6 months to actually go from listed property to sold property, right? So that's what that's kind of the standard, right? In a seller's market, right? Um, that can that can go down, right? So you can get to your 3 month mark, your 2 month mark, 1 month, and all that, right? Because not um, there's not enough inventory, right? And that's actually still where we are right now. We're still in a seller's market, especially in Colorado Springs and the El Paso County area.
Right.
And exactly. So that's what I really need to get through to sellers is that even though in the past when rates were, really down and everybody was just buying up properties and it only took 1 to 2 days to, get your property under contract and stuff like that. Now that we're starting to see things balance out a little bit, don't be surprised when your property takes a month or two, right? Because that's actually still a short time frame.
Right.
Right, we're not even close to where an average property would take to sell.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's been a big thing with sellers. They are expecting houses to be sold in 3 weeks, 14 days, whatever the case was. And now you're seeing buyers having options and they're home shopping, which is really what it is, right? It is giving buyers to actually go through the inspection, make sure it's the house that doesn't have these issues for them, get a full appraisal, make sure they're paying a fair market value for it. And in case there's any major issues, the appraiser would call it out, the mandatory property repairs. So it's really all about perspective when it comes
It
to
really is.
like selling. When it comes
Yeah,
to selling or buying a home, I think this is what this should be titled perspective when it comes to buying or selling, because everyone has this perspective on rates that this is just terrible, the world's on fire. And then I talked to, somebody who bought their first house in the late 80s, early 90s, and their rates were 14%. And that was
yeah,
a steal because a few years before that, I think 87, they were 16, 17%. And then
yep,
we look at these now. Of course, yes, home prices have gone up, but it's all balanced. And then these normal rates for getting your house off the market, some people are just so impatient, but they also probably don't take advice to set these expectations like, hey, if you want to list your house, list now. So then you
that's
have enough
that's where
room to
we're
meet
at.
your
Yep,
timeline goal.
that's where we're at. And they've neglected some of them. They neglect the preparation that it actually takes. Because they remember 2 years ago when their friend down the street sold their property in 2 days, right?
Yep,
So they think, yeah, preparing for it. What do you mean? I just got to move my stuff out and we're good.
yep,
So,
yep. Setting those
yeah,
expectations. So
definitely. Yeah. Well, I definitely appreciate this chat again, once again, and hopefully we can put this out as soon as possible and make sure, just like you and I always talk about, make sure that we're putting good information out and we're educating the public on our area, our market.
Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Yeah.
Pretty sweet.